Hi guys, if you can hear a fan right now, that's just my fan because I just came back from cricket. It's really hot today, even warmer than was like 2 days ago. So I didn't record yesterday because I had a bad headache as soon as I came back. I don't know why. But yeah, today we're going to be doing Oversimplified Hitler. So since you guys didn't vote, I said I'll do Civil War, but then I found the Siege of Hitler and then just decided, okay, yeah, fine, I'll do it. None of you guys voted, so I decided which one to do instead of Similar. So here you go.
Look at this baby. So gentle, so
That's Hitler, by the way.
innocent. You'd think this child would grow up to become a good man, an honest man.
No.
Well, think again. Hitler was born Adolphus Hitler in 1889 in a small
Yeah, he was born in Austria, not Germany. He was born in Austria-Hungary.
Hitler was born Adolphus Hitler in 1889 in a small town in Austria-Hungary.
Wait. I want to see. He said there was something which he said.
Hitler in 1889.
Why can't I always get that?
Born Adolphus Hitler in 1889
It said like I'm a doofus.
in a small town in Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Schicklgruber, was born out of wedlock, but eventually changed his name to that of his stepfather, becoming Alois Hitler. Alois was a mid-level Austrian customs officer, not really rolling in cash, but certainly rolling in women. He married a rich, older lady, but then immediately started having affairs, including one with a much younger house servant. A few years later, he left his sick wife to be with his mistress, but since the Catholic Church didn't allow divorce at the time, he couldn't marry her. So he waited for his old wife to die and had a child in the meantime. Then his wife died, so he married his mistress and had another child, but then his new wife got sick, so he employed his much younger cousin Clara to take care of her. Then when his new wife died, he immediately got Clara, his cousin, pregnant, and then married her. In that order, you rock star. Clara and Alois had 3 children together, who all tragically died while in infancy. So when
Adolf, the Hitler which we know today, was the first child of Louis' third marriage, which actually survived for her.
the 4th child, Adolf, came along, Clara spoiled him rotten. The Hitlers had 2 more kids, and the family moved around a few times, meaning Adolf had to attend 5 different elementary schools. Adolf's father was strict, quick to anger, and took most of it out on the eldest son until
And that's what Hitler then became.
he had enough and ran away at the age of 14, leaving 7-year-old Adolf to do most of the chores and get berated by his father. The result was a difficult relationship.
Yeah, he did not like his father at all, but he was super close to his mother. And once she died, Hitler got into very deep depression for a few years until World War I came when he enlisted as a soldier.
With his dad, while he was super attached to his mother, who worried over him and his health excessively. Hitler did well in school at first. His grades were good and his teachers praised him. He was popular with the other kids and enjoyed gathering them together to play war games. He also loved reading and particularly liked stories
White guys take over it. Yeah, he was a bit racist, but yeah.
About cowboys and Indians. As he grew older though, he started to get into trouble. He was caught smoking once, organized a raid on a local orchard, tormented his pro-Austrian
An actual raid. I mean, it was an actual raid. I will show you how the raid looked like. Okay, here. So this is Hitler's raid on orchard. Wait, what? The airborne operation personally. Wait, what? No, that doesn't make any sense because, wait, 1 minute. Okay, so other than the raid which I found on what was happening during World War II, I really couldn't find any other raid. So yeah, I don't know about that. So yes.
Your religion teacher with symbolic gestures, displaying his allegiance to the idea of united Germanic
Yeah, he obviously didn't use that flag. It was red on top, white in the middle, and then black on the bottom. That's the old German flag.
people under a greater German state in defiance of Habsburg Austria. You know, the usual. All of this enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely. The area of Austria-Hungary that Hitler lived in was once part of the German Confederation, and many of the people who lived there considered themselves to be German. Adolf tended to just go against whatever his father said, and since his father was an Austrian public official, Hitler got big into German nationalism. This enraged Adolf's father, who punished him severely.
And the area which that is in actually modern day Austria. So it's not in the modern day Czech Republic, it's an actual modern day Austria. So he was a full-on Austrian, but Austrians were considered a branch of Germans. So were the the Luxembourgish, and um, and the Czechs were all considered a branch of Germans. Were all considered different branches of Germans. So yes, yes, they just they were considered a branch of Germans. So.
Severely. Around this time, a family tragedy struck. His 6-year-old brother, whom he loved a lot,
And Edmund was by far his favorite brother, half brother, but by far Edmund was his favorite brother.
died of measles when Adolf was 10 and was buried in the cemetery just across from their home. Around this time, neighbors reported a change in the young boy. Strange behaviors such as talking to trees and staying up late staring at the stars from the
He missed his brother, and that went on to change him for his entire life.
cemetery walls. He lost interest in religion and his school grades started to decline, which enraged his father, who punished him severely. It also didn't help that he had just entered high school and the cool city boys treated him like a rural peasant. He had to repeat a grade and had little interest in most school subjects, instead spending his time reading and drawing.
Society 102, I can't say what else. Social Darwinism and why some people are just better than others. Okay.
Interest in most school subjects, instead spending his time reading and drawing, which he was quite good at. One day his father said, "Son, someday you'll be a big balls public official like me."
No, he became a big boss dictator, so yeah.
And Adolf replied, "No, father, I'm going to become an artist and soar high above the clouds with the eagles." This enraged his father, but by this time he was an old-ass man, so he just sort of let it go. And then died of a lung hemorrhage. Hitler just about passed his final semester and celebrated in the typical way by getting blackout drunk and wiping his ass with the certificate.
Yeah, and that actually happened. I mean, I watched a reaction video from one of my favorite YouTube channels, Vlogging Through History. And he actually, I watched a reaction video to this, and he actually told that I really want to search that up, and he actually found it to be true. So he actually got drunk and wiped his butt with the certificate.
However, he didn't take the overall final school exam, instead just dropping out.
Social Darwinism and nationalism are great and all, but just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting you commit genocide or anything. Yeah, Hitler did a lot of that. Let's hope no one who will be major historical significance is absent from this. Oh my, Hitler was a major historical significance and he was absent for this. By the way, has anyone seen? By the way, anyone's seen Adolf? Yeah, that's just funny.
Out. The now 16-year-old boy was unemployed, without much purpose in life, and for the next 3 years he stayed that way. He spent most of his time at the opera with his only friend, August Kubizek.
Yeah, August Kubizek was a really close friend to Hitler, especially after he lost his brother. I'll show you. Okay, here we are. August Kubizek. August Frederick Kubizek was an Austrian musical conductor and best known for being a close friend of Adolf Hitler when both were in their late teens. He later wrote about their friendship in his book, The Young Hitler I Knew. Yeah. He died in 56. So he died 11 years after Hitler, and his child was Augustin Kubizek. He actually served in the army during World War I. Yeah. And he died in Austria, was born in Austria. So yeah, that's about his best friend. Okay, wait, sorry.
Kubizek later wrote his memories of the young Hitler and said he was passionately interested in many
That's the exact book I just told you about. The Young Hitler I Knew.
things, felt he was in many ways better than others his age, was quick to anger just like his father, and an incredible speaker once he was ranting. When he was 18, he said a very sad goodbye to his mother and went to Vienna to take the entrance exam for art school. He failed. Soon after, he had to return home. His mother was sick and her health was rapidly deteriorating. Hitler stayed by her side, and when she eventually died, the family doctor said he had never seen someone so overwhelmed with grief as Hitler was.
And once after his brother died, that changed his life into another way. But once his mother died, he was going down the path of tyrannical and just gonna be more of a dictator. He was so filled with grief after that.
Then Hitler returned to Vienna, still hoping to find a career in the...
And he actually lived on the streets for a few years. He lived on the streets, so I believe 1910 to 1914. somewhere there. So yeah.
arts, but he never did. Instead, without parental support, Hitler ended up on the streets. Now in his early 20s, he spent a few rough years living in and out of homeless shelters, making what little he could from selling postcards he painted. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when and how Hitler's extreme ideological beliefs formed, but his time in Vienna would have certainly played a role. Anti-Semitism was widespread in the city. The mayor, whom Hitler supported, was an outspoken
And anti-Semitism was basically anti-Jew, and we know Hitler for killing Jews during the Holocaust. So yes.
anti-Semite. There were many right-wing anti-Semitic newsletters, which Hitler took a keen interest in. He bought into the conspiracy theories and became a firm believer in the idea that there are many races in constant struggle with one another, the purest of which were the German Aryan people, and the worst of which, he believed, were Jews.
An Aryan.
Since Austria-Hungary was a multi-ethnic empire full
Let's see. Yeah, Austrians were considered Germans, so yeah, consider that as Germans. Italians, yes, Italians made up most of Tyrol, Trieste, and this half of Austria, which is modern day Austria. The Slovenians, Croats, the Bosnian Serbs, Hungarians, the Czechs, the Poles, the Ukrainians, the Romanians, and Slovaks.
of lesser races, Hitler wasn't a fan. So when he was 24, he moved to Munich in Germany to avoid doing military service. And for one more year, he was a drifter on the streets, until something huge happened. In 1914,
World War I.
long-standing tensions in Europe erupted into the First World War. Crowds across Europe celebrated the news. Within days, Hitler volunteered for the German army. The war gave him a purpose in life. His fellow soldiers gave him friendship and brotherhood. Despite the
Yeah, they celebrated thinking the war would be short and, not really mattering much. But it was the deadliest war in history, so yes.
horrors of war, Hitler considered it to be the best time of his life. He was reportedly a brave soldier and was awarded the Iron Cross, first class. He was also very lucky and had many close encounters with death. His luck ran out in 1916, however, when
and a man actually could shoot him, an English soldier named, I forgot his first name, but his last name was Stanley. He could literally shoot Hitler. Hitler was tired. Hitler was in the range of his rifle. He could literally have killed Hitler. Maybe not even done World War II. But he decided not to and spared Hitler's life.
an artillery shell injured his leg. He went back to Germany to recover and was outraged to find a general apathetic anti-war attitude among the exhausted and hungry German populace. With the war turning against Germany, he returned to the front lines, but was temporarily blinded by a British gas attack in 1918. A month later, still recovering in hospital, Hitler learned of Germany's defeat and surrender. The terms of the peace treaty were tough on Germany.
Yeah, and it's the Indian delegate right here, so that's pretty cool.
It had to pay a lot of money and lose a lot of soldiers.
100 billion.
These conditions weakened Germany and humiliated the German people. Europe's borders changed after the war too. New countries were formed out of Russia's lost territory, Austria-Hungary was dissolved, and there was one big new country splitting Germany into two. Hitler, seeing the country he loved humiliated like this, said that hatred grew in him for those responsible, by which he meant communists and Jews, who
and communists because of the communists in Russia, he hated communists and Jews. But yeah, so you can see even though Russia's winner, they still lost Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. You might ask why. Well, because of the Russian Revolution. The revolution meaning they also ceded, and Russia never got Finland back, but it only got Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, which is the Baltic states, back just after World War II had begun.
believed had stabbed Germany in the back by spreading dissent and anti-war propaganda back home.
Stabbing Germany in the back. Okay, same thing. Okay, since this is pretty short, I'm just going to watch part 2 along with this, so yes.
Since Germany's military had to be reduced, Hitler could no longer remain a soldier after the war, but he kept working for the army as an informant.
Yeah, he worked for the army as an informant and spy. I'm just going to react to both parts right now, so yeah. These are short.
After the war, communists in Germany had attempted a revolution, and the government was worried about communism in general. So Hitler was tasked with infiltrating and reporting on any new political parties that could pose a communist threat. A new party called the German Workers' Party.
Yeah, the German Workers' Party eventually becomes the Nazi party. So yeah, so Hitler eventually ended up joining.
Party threw up a whole bunch of red flags, so Hitler went along to one of their meetings, but found that they weren't communist at all. They were extreme right and shared many of his extreme beliefs, so he left the army and signed up to join the party. His fantastic speaking abilities impressed the party's leadership and supporters, and he very quickly rose to the top.
Yep.
He decided the party needed a makeover, so he renamed it to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi for short, and he gave it a new color scheme. The Nazis weren't very specific on policy, but Hitler made extravagant promises to return Germany to its former glory by
He kind of did in the middle of the war, but that's it.
undoing the Treaty of Versailles and reuniting all ethnic Germans into one nation.
Ethnic Germans meaning all of Germany's current territory, well, pre-World War II territory, and all of the Czech Republic, then all of Austria, most of Slovenia, all of Italy and Austria, and
Nation. He also said that only pure Aryan people should be allowed to be citizens and that all Jews would lose their citizenship. These ideas were already common in extreme right politics, but what set the Nazis apart was Hitler himself, and they quickly became the leading party on the extreme right. Many of the political parties in Germany at the time had paramilitary wings, and the Nazis were no different. Hitler set up the very descriptive Whole Protection Detachment, later changed to the very delightful Gymnastic and Sports Division, and finally settling on the ominous Storm Detachment, or SA for short. Their job was to defend Nazi party meetings and intimidate political opponents, and they would frequently engage in battles with communists on the streets. Since the Allies had demanded a reduction in Germany's military size, many trained soldiers were left unemployed.
and then they joined the SA or they joined the communists.
They liked the Nazi ideology, and
Most of them joined the SA.
it was only natural for them to join the SA, which grew larger and larger over time. The new democratic government that formed after World War I was pretty weak and ineffective. In order to pay reparations to the Allies, it started printing more money. The problem is that printing
If
money
you print the money, it doesn't help. It just causes inflation, and that's what's been happening lately in India. Like I believe, by the year 2000, $1 was like 60 to 65 Indian rupees. Now it's 70 to 75. So it's just been inflating.
doesn't actually give a country more money, it just makes money less valuable. So as the country printed more
It gives the country more money, but it gives the country only more notes. It doesn't give the country more value. It just makes the money less valuable.
and more money, it became worth less and less, and the currency crashed. In 1919, $1 was worth about 4 German marks. By December 1923, $1 was equal to 4.2 trillion marks.
Trillion marks. That's crazy.
The price of bread rose to 200.
The only time that that type of inflation has been that's been overtaken is in the very recent Zimbabwean inflation, where 1 trillion Zimbabwean dollars was equal to about 30 US cents, which is like what? Yeah. And then post World War One or World War Two, I don't know, but post one of the wars, Hungary's inflation. Most people only talk about Germany's, but Hungary was also a big one.
100 billion marks. Banknotes became worthless. Unsurprisingly, in such an economic crisis, Germany struggled to pay the Allies. The French were pissed about this, so they occupied the Ruhr, an area full of factories, and took
Why did they show old France's borders? And yes, Luxembourg was independent, but they aren't showing it right now.
the economic output from the area as payment. They treated the German civilians badly, and in total, approximately 130 Germans were killed during the occupation. Germans were furious, and Hitler and the Nazis thought that now would be a great time to lead a revolution. In November
Yeah, it wasn't a revolution, but it was the march on Munich, which Hitler did, and they got arrested. And he started off with something that's known as the beer hall push.
1923, inspired by something a certain bold Italian man did a year earlier, Hitler stormed a meeting at a beer hall and called for an uprising against the government. With his supporters, he marched on the streets of Munich, hoping the police would join his side. They did not. Hitler was put on trial for treason. He could have been sentenced to life, but the right-wing judges thought he was a pretty cool guy. Hitler knew the judges and knew that they would be lenient, so he took the opportunity to make impassioned speeches during the trial. And in the end, he was sentenced to just 5 years in prison, of which he only served 9 months. And when I say prison, it was more like a pleasant hotel stay.
Yeah, it was a hotel stay, not a prison.
where he had plenty of time to write a book.
Yeah, Minka.
The whole affair was covered by the media nationwide, and it made Hitler famous. Hitler and his extreme message were now known throughout Germany.
Yeah, and Munich is in Bavaria, so it was born Bavaria. So it's...
But the everyday Germans still didn't care much for him. In the 1928 election, the Nazis only won
Yeah, only 2.6. Come on. Well, the SPD won more. I have no idea all of these old German parties. If anyone from Germany is watching this video, okay, please tell me some of these full form of these parties. So, yeah.
about 2% of the vote. Many were still intimidated by all the violence and the shouting and how unpolitician-like he was. But a new economic crisis would change all of that. To help Germany pay its reparations, America agreed to give it.
Yeah, they give Germany money, but then the Wall Street crash happened. They loaned them money. They didn't just give it, they loaned them. So I mean, Germany would have to pay it back with extra interest.
Loans. In October 1929, the Wall Street crash happened, and America wanted its money back. The economic strain this put on an already struggling Germany was severe. Unemployment skyrocketed, poverty was widespread, and Germans were sick of it. It was clear that the newly formed democracy wasn't working. In the face of crisis, Germans began moving to the political extremes. If you were German and wanted change, your
Extreme left was communist, extreme right was fascist.
choices now were either the communists or the Nazis. Hitler claimed that he was the only one who could return Germany to its former glory. The Nazi Party used propaganda to make Hitler seem like a great and powerful man, and they gave the German people a scapegoat to blame for all their suffering. The promise of a single strong dictator was a breath of fresh air for Germans after years of failing democracy. Some bought into his extreme ideology. Some didn't agree with the racism, but were willing to vote for him anyway. Many didn't know much about politics at all, but just got
But they just wanted that so that they had a better life.
caught up in the hype. Election after election, the Nazis became more and more popular, until in 1932, they became the biggest party in the German parliament. Hitler came to truly believe that he was some sort of great, destined savior of Germany. He turned megalomaniac. He decided to run for president, and did surprisingly well, but still lost to the extremely popular World War I general, Paul von Hindenburg. Since he was now the leader of the biggest party though, he demanded President Hindenburg make him chancellor. But Hindenburg was reluctant, seeing that Hitler was clearly such a big racist. Industry leaders urged Hindenburg to give Hitler the chancellorship, fearing the rising support for communism, and leader of the Center Party von Papen, who had been secretly negotiating with Hitler, said to Hindenburg,
Yeah, he negotiated with Hitler, but he betrayed Hitler and wanted to do that so that Hitler would get a weak position and couldn't rebel. But then Papen told Hindenburg to make him chancellor, while he became vice chancellor. So he could put a bit of control on Hitler, and so could Hindenburg.
how about we make Hitler chancellor on the condition that I get to be vice chancellor and most government jobs go to us moderate conservatives. That way, I'll get to
Yeah, the moderate conservatives, while Hindenburg was also a moderate. Papen was a moderate, while Hitler was an extreme left fascist. A fascist and not a conservative at all.
keep my power. I mean, we'll get to keep our power and we'll control Hitler like he's our angry little puppet. What could possibly go wrong? As it
Everything.
turned out, everything. Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933, but he was not yet a dictator. In February, the German parliament building was set on fire. Historians still aren't sure who did it, and many suspect the Nazis did it themselves, but Hitler blamed the communists, and he convinced President Hindenburg to sign an emergency decree allowing him to imprison all communists and other political opponents.
Wow, he's been like that.
Communists and others were sent off to the first concentration camp in Dachau. At this time, the elderly President Hindenburg passed away, giving Hitler the perfect opportunity. He introduced a law to parliament that would allow him to make all future laws and decisions entirely on his own. With his political opponents imprisoned and the SA intimidating others, Hitler's law passed. Just 2 months after becoming chancellor, Hitler was now a dictator.
Yeah.
He still had one problem. The leader of the SA wanted the SA to take over the job
And now they will talk about something known as the Night of the Long Knives. So,
of the regular German army, and the German army didn't like that idea. Hitler needed to maintain the support of his professionally trained German army, more so than his rough and rowdy SA.
yeah, his SA would mostly have parties when they were drunk. So yeah.
So one night in June 1934, he had Röhm and many other of his own SA officers rounded up and murdered. While he was at it, he took the opportunity to brutally settle some personal scores as well. Politicians who had disagreed with him in the past, reporters who had printed negative articles about him, one guy who did absolutely nothing, but they thought he was someone else. In some cases, even their families were murdered. In total, Up to 200 people were killed in what became known as the Night of the Long Knives. The army, now satisfied that they wouldn't be replaced, pledged total allegiance to their new Führer, and Hitler's control was now absolute. Life in Germany changed violently. Freedom of the press, expression, and public assembly were suspended. Jews were initially branded and their businesses boycotted, and eventually Hitler would go on to have 6 million Jewish men, women, and children killed in concentration camps. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced into sterilization for physical and
some of them, when they saw Hitler taking power, they'd convert to other religions or just become atheistic.
mental imperfections. The Hitler Youth became a way to brainwash the young. Boys were trained to fight and returned home from camp violent. Girls were told their purpose was to have many pure Aryan children, and they would sometimes return from camp pregnant. When their parents were understandably horrified, their children would threaten to turn them over to the Gestapo for standing in the way of Germany's greatness. The standard greeting changed, and you could be sent to a concentration camp for not using it. This way, it seemed like everyone was a Nazi supporter. If you dared oppose Hitler or speak out against him in any way, you also would be sent to a concentration camp. German nationalism captivated the young Adolf. Extreme ideology and anti-Semitism festered in him as a young man living a hard life on the streets.
Yeah, and on the streets in Vienna, which was one of the most anti-Semitic cities in the Europe.
Germany's defeat in the First World War filled him with hatred and a thirst for vengeance. A political movement that treated him like a god, and hundreds of thousands looking up to him as their savior, made him a megalomaniac. And soon, his aggressive foreign policies would drag the world into a second tragic global conflict, otherwise known as
World War II. Okay, so yeah, so that's all I have to add. I'm sure my video be like demonetized because it's like Hitler, but yeah. So guys, so thank you for watching, and yeah, I'll see you there. Yeah, so thanks for watching and bye.